So the way Transformation Advisor works is that when you fire it up initially, it will give you a script that you will download and you would run on your legacy environment to collect information about the installed apps. And you can do it. You can point it at JBoss or WebSphere servers and gather the information there. Or for other app servers, you can actually just point it at the artifacts like the ER and WAR files, and also get useful information about the legacy apps running on those particular environments. So when I bring it up, what I've done here is I've sort of used the cooking show approach. I've already run this on an existing instance of WebSphere application server version 8.55. And on that server, I had, I put a handful of different apps. So I put the old sort of JEE pet store app, which was sort of been around for quite a while. This is sort of the original one. And then I did a couple of samples, WebSphere samples. One is called, it's called Plants by WebSphere, and it's been in every version of WebSphere for quite a while. And I had a couple of versions of that, an older one based on JE5 and a more modern one that was based on JE6. And then a very simple app, which is just essentially just a web app with a database interface. So it was very simple, just to kind of show you the kind of range of information that you'll get by running the tools. So really the most interesting ones will be the older apps. So let's take a look at one of those. So let's take a look at Pet Store first. So when I click on this, it gives me some information, but what I like to do is I like to go to the bottom and do what's called an analysis report. And that gives me a fairly comprehensive sort of look at the entire application and highlights problems that I might run into if I'm trying to modernize this. And in particular, if I want to run this in a container using the WebSphere Liberty, Open Liberty application server. So if I look at this, you can see that it flags things like databases, and then it gives me some warnings about particular issues I'll run into. So here, for example, it has a red X, so it's telling me this will not run as is in the modernized environment. And in particular, this is using an older version of Java server faces that's using a class that does not exist in the new environment. It's using a com.sun.faces class, and those have been updated to use JavaX classes. So that would need to be changed before this app would run in the new environment. And then there are other warnings, but those are, those you can look at those, but those for the most part typically don't, preclude you running this on the new environment. So so we'll go back here and we'll take a look at another one. And frankly, realistically, if you're dealing with any kind of legacy apps, unless they're really recent in terms of when they were developed, you would expect to see your report to have at least some red. So let's look at the old version of Plants by WebSphere to just give you an idea of some of the other issues that you might run into. And then again, I'm going to go to the end and go look at the analysis report. And as you can see, I do have a severe error here. And now it's telling me that the Java API, JAX RPC, is no longer supported. So in Open Liberty, JAX RPC is not supported. And generally speaking, it's sort of not, it's not a technology that you would want to go forward with anyway. REST is much more sort of prevalent now rest on JSON, and JAX RPC is more about having, using remote procedure calls, and again, is quite dated. So if we were going to move this app to, again, WebSphere Liberty, this wouldn't work because there is no support for JAX RPC in Liberty. So this is what this rule means. And if I scroll down here, a couple other ones. This is it uses older EJB technology, and some of the features, in particular this feature, transaction propagation, is not supported. And then here it's talking about the WebSphere web services APIs and SPIs, and this is actually directly related to JAX RPC not being available. Because in order to support JAX RPC, an app server has to provide their own sort of implementations of certain interfaces. And then, so just, and then some other useful tips, like having, this particular application uses uses Java properties, and, it's warning against this. We'll talk later on briefly about the 12-factor method, but, having application configuration in your actual in your code is not really a good idea. What you should do is inject those values via environment variables. So those are two examples of sort of older apps that have some showstoppers in terms of migrating them to a more modern environment. And then if we look at some of the more modern ones, you can see there are no issues there. You can see that for each one there is an effort, an estimated effort. These actual numbers are probably not that useful, but where they're really useful is just being able to compare the effort between different apps. So it probably won't take you 6 days to migrate this particular app, but it's generally, probably about half as hard as migrating the old plants, my WebSphere. So it's useful as a sort of comparison tool. And then when I click on one that's ready to go, I can look at the migration plan, and you can see it provides a lot of useful things that I can use to sort of accelerate that migration. So it gives me a configuration file for Open Liberty. It gives me a Docker file so I can build an image. It gives me some Helm charts to make it easy to deploy. It gives me some Kubernetes object YAML files. It gives me a Jenkins file that could be used for CI/CD, and it also gives me a Maven file that I can use to actually automate the building of this particular, of this particular app. So then when I go over here, I can see it gives me a kind of step-by-step procedure of how I would go about it. So the first thing would be the first thing they recommend is to actually install Liberty locally and sort of run the app there to make sure everything works. Then you can move it over to the, some kind of Kubernetes environment, and this tells you about the prerequisites, and then step 3 talks about actually implementing it, and then you end up hopefully with this app running in a Kubernetes environment with a sort of minimum of effort, right? So again, the idea is re-platform, not looking to refactor, rewrite, repackage, or anything like that. We just want a really quick and dirty, get this workload, get it up and running in a particular, in a Kubernetes environment, so I can use that as part of my sort of evaluation of what how feasible it would be to move this particular application.